Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot and welcome to another mod with me. Today we're going to be trimming and edging the mass market edition of the Dark Goddess Tarot. So I already had the indie edition of the Dark Goddess Tarot, and this is definitely my preferred edition to work with. I like the way the titles are done and the borders are done on this deck. I also quite prefer the backs, but I did purchase the mass market edition in order to get this guidebook because the guidebook is absolutely amazing. It's beautiful, full color. There's lots of information here. And I was pretty much stoked just to be able to get this. The deck was kind of a bonus for me at that point. But since I had the deck, I thought maybe I would go ahead and use it as maybe some altar cards or to work within my Dark Goddess practice. And so I thought this would be a lovely deck to use for that. However, I'm really not fond of what they did with the borders or the fact that it has the shiny gold gilding. And so I thought, well, what I wanted to do with this deck is to have a borderless edition. So I thought, why not go ahead and trim it? I have my original deck so that I can use that still for my readings, and I could use these cards once I make them borderless as kind of altar cards or intention cards or things of that nature. However, because I have the book, I could still use this for readings because I can always look up each card because there are full color, beautiful big images of all of these cards in the new guidebook. So I could actually still use this for readings, pulling in the tarot associations and the Dark Goddess themselves by referencing the guidebook whenever I needed to. But since I have my indie edition that I do my readings with primarily, I thought this one would be fun to just go ahead and let's take it down, make it completely borderless, and see what it looks like. So real quick before we begin, let's go over our tools. I have my Fiskars trimmer here. I have my corner rounder for when we're all done to round the corners again. I have my little corner ruler that I use to create a guide, my washi tape to hold it down, and also my straight ruler to make my check my measurements on my guide. So because I am going to be doing this deck completely borderless, and I'm going to take off the not only the titles at the top, but also the titles at the bottom, and of course the two sides, I don't really need to worry about looking for a card that the text is going to be the issue because I'm going to cut all the text off. What I'm going to look for this particular deck is actually where this title banner might impede on the artwork. I know from looking through this deck multiple times that there's Baba Yaga's one. One of the cards that it really does impede on is Hecate, which really makes me quite sad because she is one of my primary deities. But you know, we're gonna go with it. So we're gonna look through real quick and just see anywhere where I feel like this banner thing is really impeding on the artwork itself. To be perfectly honest, it impedes on every single card because it is actually down over the top of the artwork. So I did end up pulling out quite a few of them where the banner really does just kind of cover up this beautiful artwork, which is really sad, but I'm gonna just double check them real quick just to see, like, if I trim just underneath that banner, am I going to be losing anything super significant? So I'm just going to take a card here and kind of look it over. So on this one, I'm totally going to be losing that little whale's face, which is super sad. So they've really made this where you can't easily make this a borderless deck, which is quite a shame because they chose to put these titles on here in a way that really impedes on the artwork. It's a shame because there are a few cards where it really is going to cut into the artwork in a kind of significant way. So here we're going to lose the snake. That's not fabulous. Some of these were okay. Hecate wasn't too bad. Circe gets really close. Ishtar and Sedna, we're really going to be losing kind of a little bit more significant pieces of the artwork, which is not really fabulous, but it is only 4 cards, so I feel like that's doable. Now, I was kind of looking at if there's any way to, I mean, I just really don't want that cheap clip art banner on there. That really bugs me. So because it is just a handful of cards, that really is going to cause an issue, I'm going to go ahead and do it full borderless. To be perfectly honest, if this was the only copy of the deck that I had, I would not be trimming it. Just in full honesty, full disclosure, if I didn't have the indie edition, I would not trim this deck because of the way that trimming it is going to cut into the artwork. So getting started, we're gonna do my usual process here, and if you do wanna see this whole process in detail, I do have a tutorial of my updated process on my channel. But just to go through it here with you as well, basically what I'm gonna do is cut every card on the same side all at once so that I can use this lovely little template / cradle / measurement method that I've kind of developed over the last couple years. This does make for very close trim and a very straight trim as humanly possible. It is of course not going to be the same as being cut, machine cut, you know, as they come from the publishers or from the printers, but it's pretty dang close, and it gets it nice and straight so that everything does end up shuffling properly, which is always good. So I'm going to go ahead and put my card in here, and I'm going to just kind of look and see about where I want to trim that. I really don't want that crazy little hashed border around the outside either. So I'm going to put that there, tape that down. I can tell you that's either the card's not straight or my board's not straight. Not sure which. Something is not straight here because judging by, can you see how, or maybe this isn't straight. Something's wonky because here you can see a bit of a gap of the line, and then it comes upwards 2 3/4 line. So that's interesting. I've not seen that it's had an issue with my deck, or with the other decks that I've trimmed. So just interesting. We'll see how that turns out, because that's quite a difference. That's quite a gap I have there, which I don't normally have. So I'm guessing these cards aren't super straight. So, you know, just more par for the course with this printing, I guess. So that's lined up straight, and my top is lined up straight. So yeah, that's quite interesting. Let's put another one in there. Perhaps this one has a bit of a bend to it. That could account. Nope, they all do. Interesting. Interesting. Let's see is it the card or is it my trimmer? Let's see. Okay, so it's the card, because hopefully you can see here, even though I put the washi in the way, when I slide the revival art in here, look how nice and flush that sits in there. So that's something to keep in mind. This deck is obviously not, I mean, it's straight. It's actually not straight. there is minor variations in the sizes of the card, so interesting. Okay, well, we're gonna line it up with the top and at least keep this point and this point even, and we're gonna hope for the best. And by the time I finish trimming it up, it should hopefully be straight, because it's apparently not right now. So I'm just checking a couple of these cards just to make sure that where I'm at is where I want to be. Get these going in here. So I'm just going to make sure that at least this place, so in this corner, I'm at least even. Hopefully that will give me the same trim on either side. I'm also going to be removing that terrible gilding. I hate shiny gilding, so anytime I can make that go away, I'm good with that. So I'm just double checking it there because I felt like it shifted when I put my blade through it. It is a little bit of a thicker cardstock, and sometimes as the blade comes down, it can push the card around. Also, they're glossy, so they slide around on the board. So you can see I ended up taking off a little sliver there. So we're going to go ahead and cut the right side off of the deck. I probably should have looked about what it's going to do to the back, but it should just take off that border, which it looks like it's doing. I'm not really too concerned about the back, to be perfectly honest. I'm not really too concerned about the back most of the time when I trim a deck. I do sometimes try to keep that in mind, but other times, you know, it really doesn't bother me. So there's the right side cut off, so at least I've got that down. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up actually trimming off the two sides, and then we will check back in. So I have finished trimming both of the sides off the deck, and I thought I would just stop for a moment, pause, and let you see what the cards look like. I'm going to keep these few that were the issue cards or the trouble cards off to the side, but you can see here that it actually, I mean, it doesn't look too bad trimmed down to just the top and bottom. Of course, if you wanted to keep it this way, you would need to slice off the gilding on the top and bottom because, of course, now I've cut into it and it's only gilded on two sides. I think this would actually work pretty well this way if you really just wanted to make it a smaller deck. It's a little bit kind of long and skinny now. It actually kind of fits in my hand better. It's quite slippery, that, you know, glossy cardstock, so it's a little slippery. It catches the light really bad, but I think it doesn't actually look too bad like this. So what I'm gonna do now, I was kind of trying to think as I was going through this process. I know that I want to take it down pretty much borderless, or I'm pretty sure that I want to take it down borderless, and because I'm going to be using it for altar cards, ritual, things of that nature, and not for tarot readings. So I think where we're going to go with this next is actually to take off the tarot associations and just leave the titles for last. Now, if you were considering possibly leaving the tarot associations, then obviously I would suggest that you cut the titles off the top next and leave those tarot associations down at the bottom so you can see how that looks and see if that's something that you are interested in keeping or if you want to actually take it down completely borderless. Because I'm more interested in using them as ritual cards, I'm going to take the tarot associations off first and then see how I feel. As much as I really dislike this banner thing going on at the top, I'm gonna see how it looks leaving it up there so that I, for one, am not going to be chopping off people's heads, and two, so that I can still know who everybody is. So that was kind of my thought process as I was trimming this deck. One of the reasons why I actually do this, besides it comes out straighter, but one of the reasons why I actually do it in steps like this, because now I can see it down with just the two sides gone. I can kind of take a moment, look at it, see what I think. You know, because of the way I'm planning on working with it or using it, I'm decided that I'm gonna go ahead and take the tarot association, so cut the tarot titles off the bottom and basically go from there. So there's that one trimmed down with just leaving those titles on the top. I'm gonna go ahead and cut all the bottoms off, and then we'll take a look and see what we think. And maybe that will work well enough but it kind of depends just on how it looks when it's done. So I'm going to finish trimming these up and then we'll check back in. Okay, so at this point I have taken all of the tarot titles off the bottom. I've hung on to a few to use for edging, to test edging, and what I have now is basically a deck that has been trimmed down on the 3 sides, leaving just the goddess names at the top. Now, I really don't know what I want to do with this. I always say you should have a plan first, but part of that is also kind of letting the deck process kind of evolve. Where are my problematic cards? So if I cut these down to completely borderless, I am going to lose some of the artwork, as I mentioned, and I think that you could totally just round these corners and call this good as being, you know, cards that would work with the goddess titles on them. Now, because I have so many different resources for this particular deck, I have the Indie edition, I have the guidebook that came with this edition as well, and there is also an app. So with all of that, I'm kind of still leaning towards I'm just going to chop the titles off as well, because here's the deal. If I left it like this, I'm going to have to at least cut a sliver of that top off in order to get the rest of that gilding off, which means that title is really going to just sit up there like that, right up against the end. And quite honestly, the titles are hard to read on that background that they've chosen. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna do it completely borderless. Take it all down just to the gorgeous artwork, which is really what myself and a lot of other people thought was going to be the case, because if you look at the guidebook, yep, borderless cards. That's what I was hoping for. So I'm gonna make my own. Am I committed? I'm committed. The fact that it's a mass market deck and that I have my indie edition means that if I really don't like it, that's okay, because I really did buy this deck for the book. But we're going to see if we can create some beautiful ritual cards or altar cards as well out of it. So there we go. Look at how much I had to cut off to get off that ridiculous banner. So yeah, lost the snake head, but that's kind of pretty. Kind of like it. And I felt it shift. So you can see there's the little bit I cut off, because these are super glossy, so they just, if you don't hold them down really well, they really do slide around quite a bit on your board. Like, I feel like that one shifted as well. Yep, just slightly, but there we go. Circe's head, little bit. So those were the issue ones. Let's do these last couple ones that I knew we were gonna have issue with. Oh, look at his little face. That does make me sad. I cut his little face off. But it's really pretty down to just the artwork. And the last really, oh, there went the wheel. I hope that wasn't truly significant because it's gone now. But again, looks really pretty. So I'm gonna finish chopping all these banners off and then we'll check back in. Okay, so here we have it, completely borderless cards. There were a few places where you can see the drop shadow from the banner. So these banners all have a drop shadow on them, and some of the places, because I cut just to that the end of the little banner, you can still see the drop shadow at the top of some of these cards. It is very apparent on the yellow cards, but I decided to go ahead and just leave it because I didn't want to cut any further down into these cards, into the artwork. I'm already, super close on those first few cards. that we had looked at. And really, I mean, if I go too much further down, I'm gonna really be impacting the artwork, I think, at that point. So they're kind of a great little size now. They were on the larger side for a tarot deck, so actually I think they're kind of a really nice size now. So at this point, what I need to decide is corner rounding. A small, I think, would be too square. I feel like a medium is probably gonna be about right, but a large might soften them up a little bit. And then there's gonna be this issue. Will my corner rounder go through it? I feel like a large is going to soften them up too much. And these are dark goddesses. So I feel like we're not like talking like sweet angelic energy here. So I feel like just the plain medium, the kind of standard rounded size, I think will work really well and won't take too much off of the actual artwork. Basically what we're just doing is getting rid of those sharp corners because now they are quite sharp. And look, no more gilding. That makes me happy. So this is a thick cardstock, and now that I've cut it and I've made it smaller, it has even less bend to it. And so it's quite significant in terms of its heft. But look at that. I mean, really, this is just how the deck should have been. Like it is on the book. Okay. You know, I know my personal preference, but I really was hoping these cards were going to be borderless because look at that. That's beautiful. We could have just put, you know, a nice little title down at the bottom or something, just maybe at least borderless on 3 sides with the little title down at the bottom that had the Dark Goddess and the Tarot Association. I think that would have been great. I have found that on cards like this, little tip, that are pretty hefty and that my corner rounder is having a hard time going through, if I pull my sleeve down to kind of cover up the heel of my palm here, it does kind of help provide a little bit of a cushion. If I was wearing a big thick sweatshirt, that would be even better. But it is going through them. It's just not the easiest thing in the world to do. It's not as bad as some I've had, but it's definitely a bit trickier. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish these up and then we'll talk color. So I have finished corner rounding the deck, and the cards are all kinds of different ways, but you can see here that they look absolutely beautiful borderless. And for the most part, most of the artwork is still contained within the area that I cut, and it's just beautiful. So I was kind of thinking about, as I was corner rounding it, what I wanted to do with the sides, just to kind of finish it off with the edging. Of course, this is always a optional step. You definitely don't need to do that when you trim a deck. And I thought about doing it in some sort of browns or something like that. But really, when it comes down to it, this is the Dark Goddess Tarot. And I feel like this back should have probably been black. But I decided I'm just going to go ahead and go with black. Black edges for the Dark Goddess Tarot. And so I was playing with a couple of different black markers. I tried this alcohol marker first, which is generally not my favorite. It does definitely bleed onto the back, which, you know, is a pet peeve of mine, because if I take the time to trim the deck, then my marker puts a border back on. That irritates me. So that one is definitely out. But I did try it. It does cover really nicely. It just does leave a micro border. I thought about Crayolas, but to be perfectly honest, I don't have a black Crayola right now. So I got into my other stash of markers. I know that a lot of people like to use Tombos on their decks for edging. I do have a black Tombow, but my Tombos are specifically for my journaling, and so I do not use them to edge my decks. I did, however, have this Artist Loft, which is basically like a store brand Tombow. And so I thought I would give it a try, and I did a test on a couple of these cards, and it did stay pretty well in place. It doesn't look like it's transferring off too much onto my hands, even though it's not 100% dry yet. So that's always a good sign. No bleeds, not transferring super horribly onto my hands. So I thought we're just gonna go with this one because this is what I have. I do have black stamp, but I just thought the marker would be faster and easier for just using a basic coverage. So basically what I'm going to do is follow the same process I always do, which is take my card, always keeping the back towards me so that if I do get overflow, it does end up on the back and not on the front of my cards where, you know, that annoys me. So I'm basically going to take this. This is a brush pen, and that's not usually my favorite, but we're going to go with it, and we're basically going to color the sides of the deck. So one of the key things for edging a deck is that once you get the first coat on, you do kind of need to give it like a little rub. I take just some paper towel and kind of go around it, and that gets off kind of the excess. It's better to do 2 lighter coats than one really, really thick one. It tends to work better, it tends to dry faster, and it tends to dry nicer. So I'm just gonna go through and sit here and turn on some videos and color my deck. Edging often takes me the most time out of the whole entire process. Of course, if I'm not doing it on camera, the whole thing goes a lot faster. But I do enjoy sharing my mods with you all. So I'm definitely game for taking the little extra time to do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish up edging these ones in black, and then we'll see the final product. So it's been a full almost 24 hours since I started this project. I trimmed it, I edged it in black, and then I let it set overnight so that the marker would dry really well. We'll see if it picks up on my hands at all, particularly because I have lotion on my hands, and I can see that it actually is. So that's definitely something I'm going to have to keep in mind. I don't know, because I've never used that type of marker before, if it is the marker itself that is causing the issue, or the fact that it's just maybe not quite dry yet, or the fact that I have lotion on my hands. But since I often have lotion on my hands, that's not really going to be great for me. So at this point, I'm gonna call this mod good for a couple of days, let these cards sit and really give them a chance to dry, and see if that does help. It has been a little bit more rainy here, and so it hasn't been quite, the air's not super dry. So I'm wondering if that maybe has something to do with it. But I'll be curious to see how it actually does in a few days. And if that does continue to bleed like this and it's transferring off on my hands, I will probably throw a coat of maybe the distressed ink over the top of it to try and seal it all in, or possibly throw a layer of Mod Podge over the side of it. I have found that that actually works really well to seal in color. It is quite a tedious process. I have done it on the Mystical Goddesses Tarot, but it actually works quite well, and it really kind of gives the edges a really pretty, almost sort of satiny gilded edge, which is really kind of cool. But overall, I think the cards came out really beautiful. I do quite like them trimmed down completely borderless. I did have a couple places, as I've mentioned throughout this mod, where I cut off a little bit more than the artwork than I really would have liked to, but I really just wanted to get those banners off. But I think overall it just looks stunning. Now, of course, I don't know who all these dark goddesses are, but because I intend to use this for more ritual type work and some magical workings, I can simply just go through this deck and either find whoever speaks to me and then look them up in the book, or if I have a goddess that I want to work with in particular, I can always just go through the book, find what she looks like or what her card looks like in this deck, and then go and find her within these cards. So I think for that purpose, it's actually going to work out really well because of the way that I intend to use these cards. Being completely borderless like this, it would probably be hard to use them in a normal tarot reading. However, I think it would make a really wonderful intuitive oracle type deck as well, once we've taken everything off of it. So I've kind of brought this deck into kind of some different areas, new areas of my practice that I'm going to be able to incorporate this. And as this is one of my favorite decks to work with, I really like having the two different options because I do have my indie edition, which is, you know, full size and still has all the titles on it in a much nicer way, in my opinion. And now I have this smaller, completely borderless, just down to the artwork deck that I can use for ritual and magical work. And I think that that's going to be really, really lovely. But I'm really pleased with the way that they came out. Hopefully the transfer will stop, but it is a water-based marker, so that might not... it might not stop coming off on my hands, which basically means that it's just going to end up being a base layer and I'll just have to add another layer over the top of it. And I really only did one coat on this particular deck because I was kind of thinking that that might be the case. There's a reason I don't often use the art markers, and that is one of them because this is what tends to happen. But it does make for a nice base layer, and I can just add another layer of black or maybe something else over the top of it to help seal it in, and of course to kind of just give it some pretty color. But I do think that being completely borderless now is just amazing. I mean, look at these cards. They are just fantastic. So this is a mod that I'm really pleased with. Again, I think as I mentioned earlier, I don't know that I would have done this and taken it down completely to the artwork if it was the only version I had. But since I have the indie edition, since I have the guidebook, I do think this works quite well for me and what I intend to use it for. But to be perfectly honest, I mean, I could still use this in a reading because I could still shuffle it, pull my cards, lay them out, and then just reference the guidebook to see which card was which until I became more familiar with the deck itself. Like any tarot deck or any oracle deck, once you start using it, you really get familiar with the imagery and what each card stands for, then it's a little bit easier to work with a deck that you've taken down completely borderless. So that's always just something to keep in mind. But I think overall, I think it came out beautiful. I'm really pleased with the way it looks. It looks like it does on the front of the guidebook, and that was really what I was hoping this deck was going to be overall, but it wasn't. So I just took it and I fixed it and created a deck that will work for me and what I want to do with it. Thank you for joining me today. You'll find links for everything featured here in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.